Morning or good morning. I guess I'm kind of out to lunch there. Good evening, everyone. Mark here again, and I know it was a week and such since we did the last live stream here, and I just thought I'd reach out and have a bit of a conversation about the drivers' cars. I mean, let's get a little bit of a debate going on here. I think a healthy debate is always great. Um, and the conversation today I'd like to kind of bring up about is what makes a great driver's car. And in my opinion, what's some of the best driver's cars out there on the market today? There are some amazing offerings out there, and you don't always have to spend a ton of money. Um, but you can still get some amazing driving cars out there. Good evening there, Gregory. Love your stuff. Always learning, and appreciate that. Welcome this evening, and I do appreciate you stopping by. That's super. Um, Lisa Holly as well. Hi, how you doing? It's great to have you guys here tonight. And like I said, want to kind of start the conversation about drivers' cars and what in fact makes a great driver's car. And I don't I'm of the belief that a driver's car isn't always based on the depth of your wallet or the size of your bank account or the amount of bankroll or cash you make or how much money you earn. I think I have some of the most interesting cars I've ever driven, and still today that I think are truly some of the best cars to drive are cars that most people can afford, or relatively speaking, of course. I mean, everything's relative. Um, Okay, Gregory, so you just said you bought a 21. I'm assuming now, given the context of the channel, I'm assuming we're talking about an F type. Yeah, I wonder if you can clarify that, Gregory. I mean, it's definitely it's always exciting getting a new car. 2016. Okay. Good morning there, Randall. Hey, great to hear from you. I know a lot of times, we've kind of connected the dots on comments on the videos after the fact, but great to see you here. Thanks for stopping by there, Randall, for sure. So I kind of, I want to talk about, I mean, you see all over social media people talking about, the latest and greatest, a 2,000 horsepower hypercar. It's new Ferrari SF90, with 1,000 horsepower. And ironically, the more and more things are people talking about this brand new Ferrari 296, which is, they call it the baby Ferrari, and the SF90 being kind of the big boy Ferrari or big girl Ferrari, however you like that. The assumption is always the big one's the one to have, but almost every review I'm hearing now that this latest 296 that costs half as much money and is down on power is actually a way more entertaining car and more enlightening car to drive than the big brother. And that's because of other dynamics, which we'll talk about here today. Bitcoin bro, hey, good evening from Vancouver. Right on. Yeah, thanks for stopping by. For sure, from Van. I don't know how the weather is there now. Maybe you want to mention, I know you guys had some pretty crazy weather there last, I think it was about a week ago. A little bit of snow was enough to kind of upset a lot of traffic. I saw that. But yeah, it was, a lot of the reviewers are saying, the better car, the better driving car is actually the 296, and largely because it's a simpler car. It's a smaller engine with a little less power, but it's also lighter. It only has rear-wheel drive instead of the all-wheel drive. It's a little more balanced. It's a little more agile, and just really everything really is more focused on the driver rather than the ultimate numbers. And so that's what we're talking about here. And everybody knows, the F-Type is clearly one of my favorites, and I want to put the plug out for an F-Type, and every F-Type driver and owner on the line right now can appreciate that an F-Type is a great car in any format. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's not just, as you look back and you take a look from a distance and see that car sitting in the parking lot and you think, hey, admiring the style and the looks of it. It's not just about the way it looks, although that's a big benefit. But what makes a car great, a great driver's car, is the way it makes you feel when you get behind the wheel. And hey, look at me, I'm a rhymer. I'm a poet and didn't know it. But anyway, I'll give you an example. I have a list of some cars that I want to share with you guys that I really believe are relatively affordable cars, with the exception of possibly a couple of them that I really think are some of the best drivers' cars, and they have their own reasons for that. One of them is, again, I mentioned the Miata. Mazda Miata or MX-5 is always been a fun car to drive, and it doesn't have a lot of power. It doesn't have all the gadgets, doesn't have all the wizardry, but it's fun car because it's honest. It's convertible. You still get in a manual gearbox. It's light. It handles well. It's nimble. And what honestly takes away some of the fun in some of these other cars is the complexity and the cost of maintenance and ownership puts them in a place where you kind of get scared to drive them and really enjoy them. But a Miata is not that way. You get in, it's very exciting to drive around in. You don't feel guilty for putting 5 miles on it like you would with a hypercar. You can actually get out and enjoy it, jump in, jump out, have some fun with it. And that's why I think a Mazda Miata or MX-5 is truly authentic. It's back to the roots, rear-wheel drive, manual gearbox, fun, high revving, reliable. You can turn the key and go out for dinner, and not worry about something breaking down along the way. And yet you can have fun at the autocross course. And you know what? It's a great car. So I think the Mazda Miata to me has always been one of those classics that doesn't cost a lot of money, relatively speaking, of course. Everything's relative because everybody's in a different place, but that's a great car. And so another one I think worth mentioning that I've had some great experiences with and I've driven the Civic Type R. And some of you guys have probably seen me comment about them on videos on Exotic Car Play Place. And it's not always, met with the most optimism from a styling standpoint. I'm not a biggest fan of the Type R. I like the more basic models of the Civic in terms of the exterior styling, but that's purely objective or subjective, I guess. And so everybody's got their own take on that. But the Type R is a hot rod. And yeah, it's front wheel drive. So from a real driver's car or enthusiast driver's perspective, I mean, that doesn't necessarily make it the most enticing driving experience. But it in fact is a very, very cool car to drive. It puts down great numbers, great performance car, and it's just a lot of fun. So you know what? Again, you can get a manual. It's got some great elements. It's revs high. It's a cool car. Bitcoin, because of the snowfall. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I know. Yeah, for sure. You guys had a lot of snow out there, and we're kind of dealing with that right now. Although here in Edmonton, the snow isn't that crazy. We had a lot of it. It just settles out, but it doesn't get wet and mushy, and it doesn't get quite as dicey. So definitely in Vancouver there, you guys deal with a lot more of that. But, when it does come, it doesn't rain, it doesn't snow that much, but when it does, it creates a lot of havoc over there. So another car that I can't help but mention, and a lot of you guys know that, I've been a little tough on BMW as of late. Just I've had some rough experiences with the brand in different ways, but I still believe, do you want to own one or do you not? People ask me all the time, hey, should I buy this BMW this or should I buy this BMW that? And a lot of times I say no. And other times I'll say yeah. And it depends on the perspective you're coming from. If you're a starving student and you're looking at that 2007 BMW 335, I'm going to say absolutely not. Save yourself the stress, the heartache, and the heartbreak because you won't be able to afford to keep that car on the road running adequately because they're just not that reliable. However, if you have the cash and you can buy a newer one, absolutely. I think those cars are impeccable. I think BMW still makes, in that price point, some of the most interesting cars to drive, not to own long term, because unless you're a wrench or a mechanic yourself, you probably will struggle. And the struggles are real, honestly, in keeping a BMW on the road. If it's more than 5 or 6 years of age, it starts to get really expensive. But one of the cars that really jumps at me is the M2 Competition. That's the later version of the M2, not the most recent that uses the revised M4 engine. I'm talking about the previous generation. I think it had nicer lines. It had the flared fenders. You can get with the optional carbon wing, and it was a hot rod, short wheelbase. You can get the DCT, you can get the manual gearbox, and I drove both versions. with the later version, which is a competition, which uses the S55 engine, which is essentially a detuned M4 engine or M3 engine from that generation. If you go with the earlier M4, it has the N or the S, sorry, the I guess a tuned up N55, and it's great. But really, it's the M2 competition that takes it to another level. It's even more higher revving. It's a twin turbo versus the single turbo twin scroll. The M2 competition is literally one of the best performing, best drivers cars you can get your hands on today, literally bar none. I will go put that out there with a caveat. Either A, you have again, a substantial bankroll to keep the maintenance if you want to keep the car long term, or you just drive it for 3 years and pitch it, whatever your flavor is. But nonetheless, I'd suggest getting behind the wheel of the previous generation M2 competition BMW, and I think they're amazing. And the reason they're amazing is just, again, if you can say BMW is a simple car, it's not, but that's as simple as some of the best drivers' cars get. The most raw, the less digital, if you will, than the more analog experience that you get when you're driving an M2 competition. So great car. What are you guys thinking out there? Do you guys have any thoughts on? I want to reach out to you guys. I have more here for the list, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on what in your mind is some of the best drivers cars, for at any price point, really. It could be from $5,000 up to 3.5 million. Yeah, Randall, absolutely like the M competitions, but not likely to leave the Jag. And yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't have no point have I felt like I wanted to pitch the Jag and get back into a BMW. They're awesome to drive, but there's nothing that's just kind of screams even more, hey, buy a BMW. It's just not. I think the F-Type is the last of that breed. It's the end of the road. It's the end of the line. And I think it's just unique. And, you do see a lot of BMWs on the road. You don't see a lot of F-Types on the road. And that's even another part is just, it makes it feel a little bit more special. Sorry, back to Gregory. Yeah, you mentioned Michelin pilots work great with the Jag in the snow in Spokane, Washington. Yeah, for sure. And you guys probably I would imagine you get weather that's kind of somewhere between what they see in like lower mainland and in like, the Vancouver, possibly, centralized area of BC. Probably, I would imagine, a fair amount of snow and sometimes wet snow. Yeah, so that's great. You know what? Again, I know I had that recommendation last time there too. So the Michelin pilots, I'm going to have to look at that, the all season versions, and maybe kind of chuck those on my car once my P0s are worn out, which maybe that gives me a reason to burn them off. Although it's the all-wheel drive, so it's probably not the best car for trying that on. But yeah, I'll give that a try there, Gregory. Thanks for that. But yeah, anybody else? Any other cool cars that you guys think are worth talking about? Gregory, you said, I do like the, was it the i8? Test drove it. I think the i8 is very, very cool. I think it's almost like it looks the part, and then you hear, wow, it's got a 3-cylinder engine, and you think, well, that doesn't sound very exotic, but the way it all works together, the small little guy, the little boosted engine, coupled up with the hybrid electric, makes it for a really fun driving experience for sure. So, yeah, so absolutely, the i8 is very cool, and it definitely has a presence. Like, you get the right color combination. I saw one here a couple of years ago, but he had like I don't know if it was wrapped or if it was just matte black. That car was absolutely cool. Very, very cool. So 100%. Yeah, I agree. The i8 is very, very, very cool car. And you can it's one of those, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can kind of, hover around in low emissions modes, and you can also get on it and have a car that's really fun to drive. So the i8 is pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, and it's, again, it's unique. That's the key here. It's very, very unique. Welcome there, Marcus. I see a little monkey there waving. So, hey, welcome aboard. So yeah, this is awesome. I'd love to hear any more car thoughts out there. And I have lots more, trust me. And a lot of them are, again, affordable thoughts and options and great cars. But I'd like to hear some more from you guys. And until I do, what I'll say is there's another car that sort of really, really, pulled at the heartstrings for me, and that was the Audi TTRS. Some people say it's not the most masculine car, but I think the 400 ponies it has, all-wheel drive, the DCT, and that thing just sucks gas and hauls ass, and it is incredible. It sounds great with that 5-cylinder turbo engine, 2.5 liters. It's an amazing ride, and yeah, it's kind of built on the Gulf chassis. It's there's some antiquated parts to that whole platform, but that drivetrain is absolutely crazy. And try to find a nice low mile TTRS these days. It's not as easy as you would think. There's a few of them around there, but I really believe that that's one of those cars that makes the grade because it's short wheelbase, all-wheel drive. Like you get in the corners with that and you throttle it and it just hooks and goes. It's just an incredible driving experience. Shifty Combo. Hey, welcome there, Shifty. I see 2006 Corvette is something I would consider if I had the means. Oh, 100%. Honestly, like almost any Corvette, I would say the only ones that really don't speak to me are I think you guys can appreciate that first generation when they switched over, the 1984, 85, they weren't great. And they used that crossfire fuel injection system. They were a mess. They didn't have a ton of power. They were not that reliable. They were loose as a bucket of bolts. But every generation that Chevy produced the Corvette, they got better and better and better. And the one you're describing, '06, when we're talking the mid 2000s now, they're actually making some really, really great cars. The C5, 6, 7s are all amazing machines. Now the C8s, I think they speak for themselves, but it's a whole nother car now. So I can go on all day long about the C8s. They're cool. And they're kind of, what everybody's saying, touted as being the McLaren or the Ferrari killer now. Yeah, they're great. But any Corvette is awesome. And yeah, older ones, newer ones. I even like the old, if you go back to like 78, 79, 80, 81 in that generation, very Batmobile, but I like them. They just have character. Yeah, long hoods, all of that. Try to get the manuals in those, but they're just cool cars. They're great cruisers. They have a presence to them. They're awesome. So Corvettes are very, very cool. Milo Zhang, Les, heard your opinion of the Porsche Cayenne. I would say the Cayenne, I like the Cayenne a lot. I love all Porsches, and anybody who knows me for any significant amount of time knows that I love the Porsche brand in general. There's some duds. They've had some misfires. Every brand has. The Cayennes, especially the newer stuff, is a lot better. The earlier generations, they had problems, but they are very, very cool vehicles. Cayenne, we drove a GTS a bunch of years ago, one of the earlier models. We really liked it. The one we drove, there was something quite off with it. It felt like it had something broken in the suspension. So I was kind of turned off by that car. And then we ended up buying something different. But I never forgot about it. And the Cayennes are great. Now, of course, most Cayennes, they're equipped with the automatic transmissions, but the larger SUVs, so they feel more substantial. And the Cayennes really in any form are great. I mean, you can get dare I say the diesels, but the V6s are great. The earlier V6s, you get the manual, then you get the V8s, the turbos, and let's face it, anytime you can get a manual gearbox in anything, to me, that speaks to its sporting intention. So I think a V6 stick would be great, but also the turbos are super. And, anytime you put the hammer down on the thing, thrusts you 0 to 60 in 4 seconds flat. Hey, that's always a good day. So honestly, I love the Cayennes. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you asked, because my wife's even been talking about possibly trading the Mercedes C300 that we currently own today in for a Cayenne, which she happens to love very, very much herself. So, Gregory, yeah, a big fan of the TVR. Yeah, you know what? 100% cool cars. We don't get them here. That's the problem here in North America, at least here in Canada. We don't see them. I see them, and there's some certainly like they have a presence. They're very, very cool. And again, it's one of those cars you don't see a ton of them around, and they were just raw animal cars, and I love them, and I love that for that. So, yeah, TVRs are very cool. The Cayenne, again, back to that. Also love the Macans too. So just throwing that out there. If you love the SUV, something that feels more substantial and bigger, of course, the Cayenne's your wagon. If you like something that's like hunkered down, lower, maybe grips the corners a little tighter, but then you lose on some of the space, there's the Macan. And personally, one of my favorite SUVs right now in the market is the Macan GTS, the brand new one. Absolutely incredible. 0 to 60, 3.5 seconds. I mean, who can go wrong with that? It's an amazing car. Jason, hey Mark, Jason here. We talked about my F-Type V8S white red top. Yes. Thanks, Jason. I was just looking at that. And your car looks absolutely stunning, I will say. It looks great. I'd mentioned this in previous videos. I think I mentioned it in the last live stream, and I've also mentioned it in some of my actual videos, that I love cars that have big contrasts, interesting colors, white with red, and then you go and you got red interior. That's awesome. And I love that. And like I said, if I was buying a car new from the factory, I probably wouldn't go black on black or, white on gray, where it's kind of very, average. I'd spice it up, the reds and the whites together, contrast stitching, accents, details. I love that stuff. And your car looks great. Like I said, I think white, I don't know what, white looks amazing in some cars, not in others. And I mentioned this in the last video, the coupes for sure, the convertibles as well with a white, with the dark roof, in this case with the red roof, looks super. So white F-types, just it rocks it for sure. So it looks great there, Jason. And like I said, I've been looking at the pictures there, and I'll probably throw out a mention there as well here on upcoming videos. I've just got to get around to actually making putting my next video out for this Sunday. But before getting to that, I thought, hey, you know what? Let's cut right in the middle of the sequence here and throw a live stream in here. So give everybody a chance to dive in. Now, I know this kind of sucks a little bit in the sense that there's a lot of folks that reached out last time and said they couldn't make it because they're in parts of the globe that, they're sleeping right now. And, I'll try to mix this up a little bit as we go on and do more live streams. I'm certainly going to try to break it up so that we can get, more people dialing in, more people that are regular viewers of the channel, but aren't necessarily viewing it at the same time. So I'll definitely be sure to do that. But yeah, 100%, Jason. Love the car. I don't know if you mentioned, V8S. Okay, so yeah, rear wheel drive. Clearly, that's going to be a hot rod. And it's funny. Interestingly enough, I came across some old archive videos. I was watching Top Gear the other day, and I stumbled across Jeremy Clarkson's video that he made about the V8 Jag F-Type. And before that, he had done the V6, and he was like all gaga over it. But then he did this video about the orange, and it was an F-Type. It was the earlier generation. It was a coupe, but it was the earlier generation rear-wheel drive. And that car was nothing but just intensity and smoke and drifts. And see, so when I say about what makes the ultimate driver's car, cars like that brings something, and mention the Miata and the TTRS is all pure grip. The TTRS is grip, go, precision. It's almost like a rally car. But then you go the other spectrum, you get cars that can get all kinds of loose, like the original generation, Jason, like your car, rear-wheel drive V8 is going to be an incredible car to drive for different reasons now, right? So it's not as precise. You can have that fun and drift it. It's like a Corvette. It's like a Mustang. It's like a Camaro with the V8s and the manual gearboxes. You're able to throw those cars into a corner and have all kinds of fun. And they drive more like, in my mind, more like a muscle car than they do a European car. And that's partially why I love them too. It's the mystique, because they feel very muscular, but still they got the Euro presence and all of that. And so it's just a very, very cool car. Very unique. Randall, thoughts on the Ferrari F8 Tributo versus the 296? Oh, yes. Great question, because I've really, really been looking at those two cars. Two totally different beasts. I mean, the similarity begins and ends with F and I, and the fact that they both have four wheels and they can come in the same color of Rosso Corsa red. That's kind of the beginning, and otherwise, totally two different cars. The F8, I was actually looking at maybe, I talked to the sales folks locally, and by the time I got to it, I'd seen some videos. Saw a video by Vehicle Virgins where he got his hands at Parker Nierenstein got his hands on an F8 Tributo, and he was like, "This thing will kill Huracan, absolutely destroy it." And the fact that it's rear-wheel drive makes it interesting. It's kind of I love the rear-wheel drive Ferraris and McLarens, and in some ways, it's those driving dynamics make them more interesting than Lamborghinis. So the F8, the sound is a little muted, but it's an incredible V8 with over 700 ponies. And then the 296, which isn't a V8, it's the V6, 3 liters. If I could choose one or the other, that'd be a tough call. I would probably have to drive them back to back. But knowing what I know, I'm leaning 296 anyway. And there's a few reasons for that. A few people have commented, it's just the F8's an incredible car, but it's started to feel a little dated. The interior, the dash, all of that feels very much like the 488, which it replaced. It was almost like a stopgap car. So while they bumped up the power and the F8 ended up with the engine from the 488 Pista, that's all a win. But then they kind of missed, and like the interior is very much the same, and it was a kind of a transition car. And then the 296 comes out, and I think the 296, while a lot of people are annoyed by the digital, all the buttons and displays, I think that's just the generation. That's just where everything's headed. Look at anything nowadays. It's all electric. It's all digital, electrical. And I think that's just Ferrari's attempt at getting on board. And then when you look at the performance numbers, this new 296 is up there with the best of the best. Like it has literally closed the gap between hyper and supercars. I saw the most recent video there with Chris Harris test driving it. And to me, if you haven't seen it, the 296 GTB test driven by Chris Harris is the video to watch because he explains it best. And he said, take traction control off and you're going to be crying all the way to the bank, paying for the repairs. So yeah, Randall and Short, both amazing cars. I'm kind of leaning a little bit more to the 296 just because I think at some point the F8, it's as amazing as it is, will feel like the older generation. I think once we see that next generation of cars come out, you had the 290, you had you had the SF90, then you got the 296, and then what's next? My word has it off the street from talking to the some of the folks over in Ferrari is that they have really aggressive vision ahead, Ferrari that is, and there's plans to create a whole slew of new interesting models. And so I can't help but think that what's going to end up happening, whether you like it or not, and electrification and all of that, it's going to feel like a whole new car. It's going to start to make the older models feel very dated, and they're all amazing. I mean, they're Ferraris, but I think if I were to throw my money down, the 296 would certainly be the car. And so yeah, you'd say you'd probably pick the 296 as well. Yeah, it's great. As you guys saw on Exotic Car Play Place, I did a bit of a review there. I had a short time behind the wheel, and I was able to take that out for a drive, and I shared my experience with you guys. There was some experiences that didn't quite make the tape, or a cut, kind of cut some parts out, just to keep things kind of like PG per se. But no, honestly, and it was an amazing ride, and I appreciate Sean for taking me for a rip around in that thing. So yeah, it's great. Lisa Hawley, welcome, Lisa. Great to hear from you for sure. And again, welcome to this evening's live stream. So Milo Zhang, to compare the look after 2020 F-Type and the elder than 2019 model, which do you like better? Great question. I've talked about that very question several times on different videos of mine, and that's a tough one, right? There's parts of both that I really like, and I'm not wavering, I'm not waffling, and I'm not standing on a fence. All things equal, I like the older generation cars better. I like the headlights primarily, and the front nose finishing a lot better. That's just my take. I just like the looks of it better. Looks a little cleaner. It looks a little bit less, I don't know. It just looks more true to the original design. And the newer generation looks a little more contemporary. Absolutely. So it's modernized, But I like the front end finishing better on the older cars. Now, with that said, as we circle around to the back of the cars, I like the newer cars better. I prefer if you look at the lower section, so the lower splitter area, it's a little nicer, especially as you get into the V8, the R's and that. They actually have an interesting, they've added a bridge in there, and they've cleaned it up a little bit in my mind. The interior is virtually the same. The digital display is the big thing. It's a take it or leave it thing. So, which would I take? I don't know. I think I would take the analog gauges, but I do like some of the appeal with the digital. I mean, Audi's make some of the best digital displays. So if you're one of those people that like the more modern tech, you have to go with the later version. You have to. It's got the better display in the center. The infotainment system is kick ass over the older generation, which was, for lack of a better word, kind of trashy. But hey, we're busy driving the car, so that's kind of like you put up with that. But yeah, the newer infotainment system is way better on the newer car. The digital display is a nice touch. And again, that rear finishing, I think, is a little bit nicer on the new car. The older car has that nicer front end. And of course, the older generation also gives you the Project 7, which you can't get on newer stuff. You also can't get the SVR on the newer cars. So there's some real reasons for going with the older models. But hey, I get it. You want the newer tech. You want better performance on the electrical side of things. Absolutely, go with the newer car. And slight up in power. Of course, now the base R comes with the same power as the outgoing SVR. So there is benefits. They're both great cars. Honestly, you can't go wrong. Yeah, Gregory. So another question you have is, what do I think about the Maserati MC20? Gorgeous. I think, again, it's another Jekyll and Hyde supercar. It's like you put it in kind of dummy mode and it huffs along quietly and peacefully, and it's not that tough and aggressive. And that is appealing to me because there's days you're out racing, you're all day at the racetrack and you're ripping around with your friends. And then your drive home is always that of, kind of more mundane and morose and chilled. And it's nice to turn it off. It's nice to just chill sometimes. So to have that switchable, and the fact that I love the looks of it. And actually, for being honest, I love the doors, and I wished Ferrari took those doors to the 296. But Ferrari does Ferrari, Maserati does Maserati. What can you say? I love the MC20. I think it's very, very cool. That's a real contender, and I think everything is cool about it. It's what's not to love about the MC20? Very peculiar that they use an engine that's very similar in specification as the 296. They say it's an entirely new engine, but hey, 3 liters or 2.9 liter, 120-degree V. Twin turbo hot V. I mean, it's just, there's too many nuances that just feel like they're too much the same to deny and pretend that there's no comparison. But the MC20 is great. A little bit pricey. I had a friend a few years ago. He had an MC12. That car has a next level presence. We went out for a drive. We were heading to the racetrack here, Castrol, actually. They were doing a race for Cure here in Edmonton, and we were on our way out there on the day off where there was like practice runs and doing sticker day, and we were heading out there, and I was with a buddy of mine, Ed, in his 911 Turbo, and there were some Ferraris and Lambos following suit, and we're all just cruising down Highway 2, and the MC12, it's incredible. The presence, it's so wide and big and loud. You get near that thing and you blow out your ears. Like I'm sure I've lost my eardrums here because of driving right next to that MC12. It's just an absolutely insane car, which is more or less Maserati's version of the Enzo by Ferrari, who said V12. It's just a sexy car. So the MC12, this is their comeback. This is Maserati's comeback. I'm not sure this car is quite the same presence or fits quite the same stopgap as, the MC12, but it's an incredible car. So the MC12 20 is a great car. Ian Callum, master at his craft. Indeed he was. And again, he came up with a surefire winner with the Jag, with the F-Type. Gregory, for sure. There's not many cars like it out there. And for that reason, I truly believe the F-Type is, and I keep saying this, not because I have one, but I have one because it is. And that's because it's a great driving car. Some people I know have commented and said, well, the ZF8 speed is a little, it's actually better than a dual clutch. I like I like the aggressive, notchy, rougher behavior that you typically get with more dual clutch or DCTs or double clutch transmissions. I like that behavior. Um, some people are like, well, it's too notchy, too rough, and too choppy. Sometimes they're noisy. But I like that. Sorry. I like that behavior in double clutch transmissions. Porsche is more refined, but when you get into, like the McLarens are a little bit edgier. I drove even a Nissan GTR, awesome cars, by the way, earlier generation, very kind of jagged feeling DCT. So I love DCTs, and you know, I know I've often said if you could put a DCT in the F type, that'd be like, to me, that raises it. But then on the other hand, the ZF8 speed shifts almost as fast. It's smoother when you want it to be smoother. It's lighter, so that benefits the car, and probably more reliable. And long term, if you had to fix a torque converter transmission, it's going to be a lot cheaper than rebuilding double clutch. So you take that small little nuance, and hey, take it with a grain. But the rest of the car, I love the F type. It's just amazing. Randall, yeah. So digital displays are nice, but get dated in a hurry. Analog is timeless. Yeah, and I agree. And that's why I said I'm sort of torn. If some people are real techies about having the latest and greatest and all that bright displays and all of that, but that does get old potentially. And when a display burns out, I mean, you're probably talking about $4,000 on a car like that versus maybe $1,000 on an analog gauge cluster. Depends on the car, of course, and all of that. But and an analog gauge cluster is cool. I remember some of the earlier 911s I had. They had old analog gauges, and they had these shitty little light bulbs. You couldn't see the bulbs, but when you turn the lights on, you could see kind of like the bright spots around the edges of the rings of the gauges, and it looks so old and vintage. But that was part of the character, and I think a lot of cars like that were, like my old Fiat X19, same thing, old Italian car. The lights would get dim, and then I hit the dash, and then they light up again. And that, by the way, too, is one of my favorites, the X19 Fiat, just because it's so tossable, it's gutless, it's unreliable, but it's just cool. Little knobby shifter on it, definitely feels very Italian. So that is another cool one too. In your opinion, Mark, what is the golden era of BMW? Yeah, that's a tough one. I think that's a tough one. I honestly, I really, really love, and I'm more. A lot of people really love the original M5. I really love the original, like the E30 Generation 3 series. To me, that was the golden. Like, I had friends that had a couple of them, and I think if they kept building off of that platform and that kind of design theme and kept things small and compact, stout, simple, I think they would have had a winner. But they kept growing it and building it and building it. In my opinion, the E30 generation was the best. And then they had the M3 and the E30. That was awesome, killer car. But my particular favorite, a friend of mine there had a 325e, and I thought that was great. And they had the 325IS and 325Is and all those other different variants, convertibles and coupes and all that, or sedans. But I loved the E30 generation of the 3 Series, and I thought that was the heyday just because of its raw, simple, basic, easy to drive, milky smooth shifters. Inline six was just a pleasure to drive, and they were surprisingly peppy for what they were. And I don't think the performance numbers on paper really told the whole story. They were a wonderful car. So for me, that was the golden era. That generation, all aspects of it, I think were the best. And in the moment you get an E, and then you're like, oh, okay, he's got an E30, and I'll buy an E36, and it's like the Joneses, right? And then you think, oh, I've got the next best thing, and then the E46 comes along. Oh, that's even better. And as you're going up the range, then all of a sudden looking back in history, all of a sudden 10, 15 years goes by, and now you're looking back and you're like, holy shit, have we come a long ways? But I'm not so sure these are cool anymore, like an E46 and E36. Although, with that said, an E46 M3 is spectacular, as is an E36 M3. Very, very cool cars too. But really, in the M3s is kind of where I'd take and leave that. Okay, what do we have? Let's see. Scott says, thanks for the videos you upload. Thanks, Scott. And I do appreciate you stopping by to say hi. I really do try to share. I, I mean, I'll be frank. Exotic Car Play Place is the channel where I believe I can help people. Like if I'm here to provide some value to somebody that's going to make a good decision or a bad decision, I'd like to think I'm going to influence you in a way that's not going to break the bank. I do talk about great cars and fun cars, and that's a big, big part of it. But there's always that balance. And some people have like there's reliability and there's fun. Where's your priority sit? My priority is like more fun. Reliability I can give up a little bit, but I don't want it down here. I want it, up here. And other people are like, well, I want more reliability. Fun can be a little bit of a factor. So I just try to help you guys find what makes sense for you. I would not put my kids or my parents in a brand new M5. It just doesn't make sense. It's expensive, it's fast, it's dangerous. Why bother? However, I would put it, a good friend of mine who's a lawyer, if he was asking me the best performance luxury car right now, I'd probably point him as being one of the options in M5 competition. So it depends on the customers, it depends on the people. I'm here to say, hey, here's a great car. It's got this kind of reliability. These are garbage cars, but they're fun to drive. Is that where your priorities lay, right? Or the other way? So I'm here to sort of decipher, give you the information, and help you guys make that right decision. Here on this channel, I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing this channel strictly as, okay, that's helping you guys as the buyers of these great cars. But on this channel, I'm going to say, throw that out the window. I'm going to talk about my lifestyle, the lifestyle of a real driver's enthusiast perspective. And this is what this channel is about. Mark Hollop's the vlog. It's throw all about, all that, balancing all game. And I'm going to tell you from my perspective what I like to drive. And I know a lot of you guys like driving a lot of the same kind of cars. So that's what this channel is about. Mark Holobit's the vlog. And thanks again. I really appreciate you mentioning that, Scott, for sure. That's great. So Jason also, although I have the original F-type display, I tried to just look at the number speed instead of the dial. Honestly, it's interesting you say that because I'm kind of the same way. I look at the tach, but at Speedo, I'm actually looking at the digital element of that. It's just easy, right? As you're scanning the road, it's just that digital part just kind of grabs your eye a little easier. The tach, of course, you want to, use that as when you're getting playful driving. But you're right. I do honestly look at that little digital element probably more than the actual Speedo, because I find the Speedo isn't calibrated in numbers that make sense as much here in Canada. So that's why I too am kind of doing what you do there as well. So Milo again, do you know the new Jaguars from India's factory or from England factory? Actually, that's I'd like to hear if somebody else has got some thoughts on that. Actually, I'm not entirely sure. I suspect it's going to be kind of more of the same. Where things are at today is where I would suspect they're going to continue doing what they're doing. But I don't know that. That's a great question. Haven't really heard too much about it. I did hear a little bit about that great, wonderful potential replacement, the mid-engine version of, it's not an F-type, but it's kind of like takes the F-type elements and goes mid-engine. I love what they're doing there, but time will tell. We'll see what Jaguar's got up their sleeves. And so what else do we have here? Randall, True Jason, love the analog Speedo look, but always look at the speed. Yeah, totally. Right. I think that's just normal. My wife does it with the C300 as well. It's got its own little gauges, but she uses the bigger, even on the C300 Benz, that center digital numbers are even more bold. So she uses that and it works. E30 M3 prices are crazy now. So you're probably right, Mark. For sure, Daniel, you're 100% bang on that. All E30 prices are nuts. E30 M3 are through the roof. That's like collectors. If you were one of the lucky ones that actually had your hands on, one of those, and you're like, yeah, just haven't been driving it much in the last 10 years, you're probably in a great place. You probably got a hot rod sitting in a garage that's worth a significant amount of money. And I wouldn't be thinking of pitching that anytime soon. Watch these markets climb. As a matter of fact, I would extend that even further. You guys asked me where the heyday of BMW is. And I know I sound a little biased, and this is going to go a little bit unpopular decision here. I personally like the E60 M5 the best as far as the more modern stuff. The E90, E92 M3s and so on. Those are hot rods, are great cars. Same generation. We're talking about the E60 M5. I love it. Not everybody loves the bangle butt thing. Not everybody loves that style of headlights that kind of looks like it's crying a little bit. But I think for those reasons, it's unique and it's cool. And I think it's got better proportions. I think when you look at the newer generations, they're quite a bit longer. They're quite a bit bigger car. They feel more like an estate car. They're almost like an older 7 Series in terms of overall proportions, or at least that's a perception. So I love the E60 M5, and that's why I own one. I really do. Otherwise I wouldn't own one if I didn't think it had something to offer. So that's my take on it. But hey, I know everybody, the E39 M5. A lot of guys are going to say, hey, that's the best. And they're great cars, 100%. Then it becomes just a personal choice, right? So personally, I think the golden, so Daniel, you say, personally, I think the golden era is E30 to E46. Is also 850 CSI is one of the best ever, 100%. The 850 CSI, the very, very cool car. Yeah, you don't really see that around anymore. And yeah, like absolutely. When you say golden era, that's kind of the earlier chassis stuff. I guess where you're going and where I'm kind of, if I can read between the lines, I would agree with that for the most part too, because if you're going to expand, because we're talking about naturally aspirated straight 6 engines. That's the point, in my mind. And so teaming up with a manual gearbox and a straight 6 without turbos is really where BMW hit the sweet spot. So you can still get up to E46 with a straight 6 manual. You can get in earlier generations of the E90 and E92s as well. But then there was that transition into electric water pump crap, into some of the other more pronounced use of plastics, of course, turbos and the 335s. And then literally the E90, E92 is where shit starts to fall off the wagon a little bit. So you're right. I would say decisively the E46 is probably the last of like the real authentic manual straight 6, real fun driver's car. What else do we have here? Daniel, F-Type's built in Coventry, England. Thanks to Randall. Absolutely. I don't know why I didn't think about that. 100%. Boom. It rings a bell. Thanks for clarifying. Would you know there, Randall, if that's going to be the kind of the continuation as we kind of move into the whole electrified world? Maybe you have more on that. And so Gregory also, if I had the money, Mercedes S1 SL65 AMG Black Edition 2010. Absolutely. A lot of the older Mercedes with, the V8s and the AMG cars were just awesome. They just sounded killer. They were like, just like Mercedes, they had that cute little 3-pointed star, but everything behind there was like pure muscle and mean. I loved it. And that's why I even like the, later, and not the current generation, say C63S's and that. I mean, those are awesome with the 4-liter, but go back to the 6.2-liter generations, naturally aspirated. The engines had some issues, heads, I think, shuffling, and there's some other problems, leaks and chains and some things there, but that was an awesome engine, that 6.2. So anything really up to that, and all the older stuff too, like you say, they're all great with the AMG engines. They're just amazing. So they're all bringing great experiences for the driver, that people that just want to enjoy the greatest driving experience of their life. So I just quickly touch on one or two other quick little cars. Lotus Exige and Elise. What do you guys think? Absolutely. Those are, without a doubt, they have to make a list of some of the best drivers' cars. They use a Toyota drivetrain, makes them reliable. Beat the crap out of them on a racetrack. They're going to be a lot of fun. But they're super lightweight, tin floors, man. They're a lot of fun. So to me, I've never driven an Exige. I've driven an Elise. Super cars. The Exige, obviously a better car yet. But they're amazing. That's one that definitely needs to hit the radar for people thinking about driving something that's dedicated performance. The 4C Spider by Alfa Romeo. Obviously, Alfas, I've never been accused of being the most reliable cars. But hey, it's lightweight, tons of carbon, and just a real fun driving experience. They look cool too. Honestly, the 4C looks a lot like a shrunken, skinny, hunkered down version of like the 296 now, or should I say the other way around? The 296 looks like a stretched out version of the old 4C. So great cars though. I love that Alpha 4C. Very, very cool. Ariel Atom, there's another one. But that's really track day car. I mean, it's not something you can really get in and kind of share equal duties. It's literally, I'm going to trailer that to the track and run the wheels off it and then go home and take some Valium and just chill out after that. And then, what else do we have on my list? The 911 Carreras. What kind of list would this be if we didn't talk about some of the best drivers' cars, if we didn't mention 911? I think the 911s are indeed, at almost any generation, they're fun. They're just cool cars. So, it's just kind of what it is, right? Milo, so why choice a black one as well as supercar? So I'm not sure I totally understand. Let's see here. BC Mono, there's another interesting one I got to mention. McLaren Senna. Let's face it. For those that have the cash, I don't have the cash for a Senna. I wish I did, because that would be high on the list. McLarens have never been accused of being reliable. No. The 765 is almost a better car, though, because it's more streetable. Doesn't look so wild and out there. But there's some really cool touches on the Senna with the see-through doors, and it's race car, like absolute race car. So the Senna is cool. If you got the money, sure, that's kind of up there. Pagani Huayra. It was recently asked, somebody said to me, what's my favorite car if I had any amount of money? It's the Pagani. There's no doubt. The fit, the finish, the design, the artwork. It's a piece of rolling art. And it sounds great too. And it's just awesome. So the Paganis, yes, absolutely. Koenigseggs are cool. Paganis are absolutely ridiculous in a good way. So for me, that's the thing, right? So Daniel, what's your opinion on the W220 S500? My dad bought one for a killer price. I like a lot. Yeah. Again, any S-Class, including that generation, they're gorgeous. I think they look amazing. The only catch with those ones is that you have to be careful, obviously, and really with any S-Class Mercedes, but even that generation specifically, I would kind of be thinking about that previous history. If you're buying a used car like that, it's so important to have good service history. And honestly, that's probably the biggest thing that I can preach on cars like the S-Class, or I wouldn't even touch a 7 Series BMW, if we're being honest. The only 7 Series BMW would be the 740, which uses the B58. That one has marginal dependability because it's using the B58, which is currently their best engine in the BMW lineup. But I would kind of stay away from BMW 7 Series. If you wanted the big, grandioso luxury wagon, you definitely go with the Mercedes. And the W220, 100%, very, very cool cars. I love the looks of them, man. They are so genuine, so authentic. That front end is just, again, it's very imposing. You have one of those roll up on you on the highway, flash, high beams, you're getting the hell out of the way because it feels like it's a substantial car. Amazing ride quality, and it's just an awesome ride. So I think they're cool. Again, there's a few little issues along the way with some of those cars. The biggest thing is the service history. Just make sure that you have good service history. And we're talking about, an S500. I also had the V8 we had an ML 500, but that was a piece of crap. For being honest, built in the US, wasn't that well made, plastic breaking off all over the place. The engine was good. The transmission was pretty good. The fundamentals were good, but it rusted like a sieve. Every piece of plastic that could break did break. And it just wasn't a really well constructed vehicle overall, but it was easy to work on. It had twin plug. I was able to change that myself. I did a water pump myself. Pretty accessible vehicle to work on. And so in these 500s, the 500 generation of engines within any of these models are going to be great. So I would say, yeah, if you got a killer price, if you got decent maintenance history behind it, yeah, that'd be a great win. 100%. Very cool cars indeed. Watch out for the rust. Keep those things clean. That's the big thing with some of these generations of S classes, and certain generations of the Benzes in general tended to rust. Yeah, so I think that kind of summarizes it, you guys. I think we're rolling up here pretty quick on an hour. And any last requests or questions on what might be my opinion, some of the best cars out there on the market today that money can buy? If anybody has anything, I'd love to hear one more. And if not, that's okay, certainly. Like I said, the thing you have to get from a car driving experience to make it worthwhile, to make it the best driver's car, to actually carry the crown, not the crown of thorns, but the crown, the true crown, to say, hey, this is the best driving experience. It's got to fire on all cylinders. It literally has to deliver. And the best driver's car is that. It's the driver's car. It's not like a poser car. There's a lot of sexy cars that look great. And when we say, oh, what about a Lamborghini this and a Ferrari that? Well, I'll tell you right now, a 360 F1 isn't a very good car. I mean, it's a cool car, underpowered. And then the F1 gearbox was trashed, kind of like the E-gears in the Gallardos, trashy gearbox. I loved my Gallardo. I think they're amazing cars, but it's not a good driver's car. Awkward all-wheel drive, so it tended to not really handle that crisply. It had okay power, 500 ponies, but with the all-wheel drive, it kind of felt like it kind of hunkered it down a little bit. It felt like it was a little underpowered, considering, it was carrying around a little extra weight. Again, wasn't the best handling car. Very rough. It didn't rattle, but it had clunks when you hit really aggressive bumps, so it was jarring. So the Gallardo wasn't the best driver's car. I loved it. It had a presence, but it wasn't the best driver's car. What would be a better driver's car would be an F-Type. I get in the F-Type. I drive the Lambo, and then I slip on into the F-Type. I'm like, oh, like a nice pair of slippers. But yet these slippers are faster than the Lambo. Go figure. So the F-Type R is just an awesome rig. So here, I see we got a couple quick ones here. Gregory, yeah, I recently had codes on my F-Type 2016. My catalytic converter, bank 1 and 2 need to be replaced. Thank God it's under warranty. I asked how much would it cost if it was out of pocket, $5,500. Ouch. Yeah, Gregory, but that's true. And I think, but that's true for any of these people are getting their stuff cut out. People getting, there's all this catalytic converter theft. I mean, people driving Honda, even some of these hybrid cars now with extra filtration and extra capacity within their catalytic converters, they're getting very expensive, even on ho-hum cars. So, well, yeah, that definitely sucks. There's no doubt about it. That's just, unfortunately, that seems to be the way with a lot of cars nowadays, that even to do a catalytic converter is going to cost big bucks. I'd be kind of curious what a cat bypass looks like on that car. I would certainly explore that. I don't know, here in Canada, in Alberta here, we don't worry about air care. We don't have to pass emissions testing here in Alberta. So it could probably look at that. I did do a lot of people do cat bypasses on some of the exotics here in Alberta. It wouldn't pass in California. It wouldn't pass in BC or Ontario, but there's places it could. But I don't know, like, where you're from, I'm not sure. So that's something maybe worth exploring, but I wouldn't necessarily go there first off, because, of course, then you're going to start having the stink. You might throw in codes. There's other things that come with doing cat bypasses. It's not always a cat's ass either. Pardon the pun. Randall, ever ride in an E-Type Jag? No, I haven't. I've seen them. I've, been at car shows. I've stumbled across them, seen them, heard them, seen them even in motion. Never had the opportunity to ride around in one. And I would definitely chomp at the bit to have that opportunity. That'd be awesome. I think they'd be, again, it's a piece of nostalgia history, and clearly kind of what started the whole trend. And, any of these cars like that are always worth, any experience you can get with that is always going to be a gem. Like, I look at any of this. When you've seen some of my videos on this channel, when I went in the Countach, to me, that's a gem ride, because that's old generation. That's like so many years generation. Some people today would call it, the millennials would call that old school hillbilly supercar, but I think that's just amazing. And same thing, like cars like that, I would love, take a closer look at an E-Type. They're great. I've never had a chance to ride in one there, Randall, for sure. So, Mario. Hey, how's it going there, Mario? I know. I think last time we chatted was on the other channel, and it had to do with. I think we were talking about the minis, or the BMW minis, as it were, which coincidentally are great cars. Earlier models, there are some problem areas, but of course we're all aware of that. But they are awesome cars. So, Mary, you say if money was no object, then no doubt Koenigsegg, Gamera, or Jesco. Absolutely. I'd also have a Porsche 911 by Singer. Totally. Yeah, those Singer 911s, man, they are expensive though. And but yeah, like it brings like it makes it better than a factory 911. What can you say? The Singer 911s are great. Like you say, if you have any amount of unlimited cash flow, why not? Those are all great cars. And those Koenigsegg's, like those are wicked, wicked cars. I'll tell you right now, like last year, Greta, my wife, of course, we were down at Calgary Lambo dealer and we stumbled across, they happened to show us. I don't know if you guys saw the video or saw any of my posts that I put online. They actually had a Koenigsegg Regera, which is their hybrid, 1,500 ponies. I was absolutely shocked by it. The Koenigsegg Regera. Stunning. The entire thing was like a red carbon fiber. The whole body was carbon. The interior, it was on a whole nother level. I looked at this thing and I'm thinking to myself, the carbon fiber rims, the carbon fiber, everything. I'd be scared shitless to even put that out on the road. If somebody comes along and they're clapped out, 2015 Honda Civic and just sideswipes you, it's all over, but they're crying. It would be really stressful. It'd be super exhilarating, but super stressful owning those cars. But absolutely, Mario, totally agree. Those are all super cars, no doubt about it. And hey, there was a guy, wasn't it in Calgary, I think, just won 70 million. Maybe he's looking at cars like this too. Jason, yeah, I'm doing the F-type coolant pipes soon in my garage. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just something that kind of comes with the territory. I think a lot of people talk about the Y pipe, or there's definitely certain parts of the front end of the F-types that tend to leak. Especially, it sounded like there was a revision in the later versions that were a little bit more dependable. Whatever that is, I wouldn't count my chickens until it's all over. So yeah, you definitely want to stay ahead of those types of repairs. If you know they're going to be a problem, or if you're going to do a big trip and you know that, hey, this car is one of those that typically kind of has that issue. It's one of those little Achilles things, right? Yeah, might as well get it done. And then, of course, the snorkel on the front end of the supercharger, that's another area that kind of rattles sometimes. So for sure, definitely stay on top of those items. But honestly, that and the differential, a little bit, keeping fluid clean and the vent clear, and you're good to go. That's the other area that's a little bit weak. Otherwise, these engines and these cars are pretty much bulletproof. No better, no worse than driving a BMW. So let's see. Well, that's an interesting question there, Milo. Don't know if it's true that someday said rest of parts of Jaguars can replace with the Lincoln Thunderbird. Well, I mean, they say there's a lot of replacement parts that are Ford, which is Lincoln. So I suspect there's probably some crossover in the parts bin that you could probably put from Ford onto your Jags. I would imagine. I would almost guarantee it. I just don't know what those would. We'd have to get a list and do a cross reference. But yeah, that's possible. Jason, yeah, doing that, going with the aluminum coolant pipes. That's awesome. Maybe next on the, if you're getting a chance, or Jason, maybe on one of my videos coming up, if I'd love to hear more about this and how it kind of turned out. And, possibly even if you're willing to share kind of part numbers and stuff like that too, or where do you got that and kind of end result and how that all turned out. Because we all know that as other fellow owners of the F-types, a lot of us are going to deal with that problem at some point. So, but yeah, thanks, Jason. And honestly, I think we're at 1 hour and 4 minutes. That was a great hour. It went by like a bat out of hell. And I want to thank everybody on this list, every one of you guys who stopped by today and, asked the question, offered some thoughts. I really appreciate it. Again, this is my second live stream. Really fun to do. It's quite interesting. And like I said, today, I just want to talk about, hey, this channel really is about driving that best car. And it's not about, you don't have to have $1 million salary or $1 million bankroll to buy the best car. The best car can be a $20,000 car. They all bring something different. And if they're fun to drive at any cost, it doesn't matter. I've had some of my best drives in $5,000 cars. So that's really what it's about. It's just enjoying the driving experience. And I mean, at the end of the day, remember, it's life's too short to drive boring cars. So, we can leave those basic, Priuses, leave those for some other car, like, leave those for other car channels and for other people that don't care about driving and they just want to get around. Maybe those are the cars you advise your parents to buy or your kids to buy. But for us who enjoy the driving experience, yeah, those aren't really the cars for us. But thanks again, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. And yeah, if you want to check it out again, it's going to be posted on the channel as a final video as well in a little bit. So thanks again, and we'll see you all real soon. Catch you then. Bye-bye.